Even if you have a commercial license to sell somebody else's models, Etsy is not going to allow that on their platform anymore. Today is Saturday, June 14th, and 4 days ago, Etsy came up with some policy updates. Now, I didn't know about this policy change until a couple of hours ago when one of my buddies in our Discord group pointed out the fact that this is going to directly impact a lot of you, including myself for some of the stuff that I'm selling. And that's why these are sitting here, because last night I recorded a whole 3D print farm episode where we printed out and we're taking a look at some of these new planter models from HP Invent over on MakerWorld and subscribe to his Patreon page. But it does seem like that is not how we're going to be moving forward in the near future, according to Etsy anyways. So to back up on this a little bit, about 11 months ago on July 11th, 2024, Etsy came out with a new policy. Now you may have noticed it if you're selling on Etsy or if you had been a seller on Etsy prior to July 10th of 2024, they introduced the new standards. So all of your products had to fall under one of 4 designations. It either had to be made by a seller, designed by a seller, sourced by a seller, or handpicked by a seller. Fast forward to June 10th of 2025, 4 days ago as of the date of this recording, Etsy released their new terms of service, but they didn't send an email out to any of the people on Etsy, or at least that I could see. So this news, if you haven't seen it already in some of the Facebook or Reddit groups, is probably brand new to you. And depending on what you sell, might directly impact your Etsy shop. Most of the things on here stayed fairly similar. Again, we have options like made by a seller, which are physical items that are made by a seller by hand or using personal or computerized tools, which is what the 3D printing community generally falls under. We have designed by a seller, seller's original designs that are produced or printed by a third party or offered as a digital download. So that would be things like print on demand, where you've specifically designed, say, an image for a shirt, but you're not producing that shirt in-house, you're sourcing it to another platform like Printful. They've got hand-picked by a seller, which we're not going to get into because that doesn't generally fall under the 3D printing community. And they also have sourced by a seller, which again, doesn't really fall under what we're talking about today as far as 3D printing. Now, where things have sort of changed here are under the made by a seller category. These include physical items made by a seller by hand or using personal or computerized tools. Items made by a seller include only handcrafted items, which are items crafted entirely by hand, including using handheld or hand-guided tools like a sewing machine or a table saw, produced from raw or basic craft materials. And they list examples of a wooden chair built by hand with a power saw or a sander. Hand-altered items, which are commercially available items that a seller has altered using specialized handcrafting skills, such as hand embroidering flowers onto a tote bag. Hand-assembled items, commercially available supplies or components that a seller attached together. For example, jewelry making tools used to attach charms to a necklace chain, sewing patches onto a denim jacket. And then the one that we care about the most is items produced using computerized tools, which are physical items that a seller produced in their shop or home using computerized tools such as a laser printer, 3D printer, CNC machine, or a Cricut machine. Now, this part right here is what has changed. These items must be produced based on a seller's original design and are often personalized or customized to a buyer's specification. Let's reread that. These items must be produced based on a seller's original design. Listings for items made by a seller must use original photo or video content of the final product. So there are a number of subscription packages that you can subscribe to, whether it's on Thangs or Patreon, where the original designer of that model will take photos that you're allowed to use to sell, so you don't have to pre-print any of the products out first. That is no longer. You must print out the item and take a photo of it yourself. Has to be your own original photo and or video. When listing personalized or custom items such as a monogrammed or engraved accessory, your first image must show a finished, customized item rather than a blank product or placeholder text. So no more your text here. It must say a name like Logan. And then it lists some examples of things that do not qualify, such as a face mask with a sticker on it, or again, like an R2-D2 Lego set that somebody has put together. So we'll continue on with the made by a seller portion in just a second, because that's the one that really impacts us the most. But I do want to move down real quick to the designed by a seller just to go over what they are claiming would be designed by a seller. So sellers' original designs that are produced or printed by a third party or offered as a digital download. Items include digital downloads of the seller's original designs, which is, again, original content created by you, the seller, and then sold as a digital download. So that could be a 3D model that you made yourself, are listing and charging a set fee for. Seller's original designs produced by a production partner, which include designs that are created by a seller and then produced with the assistance of a production partner. Again, that leads back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, where you could have designed, say, a 3D model, and then you use a service like Slant 3D as your production partner to get those items manufactured and sent out. That's totally fine. One thing that kind of surprises me here is they are still allowing creations that were made using AI tools such as DALL-E or another image generator. They do have to disclose within the listing if their product was made using AI, but it is a bit odd to me that they're now limiting your use of somebody else's 3D model that you've specifically paid for a commercial license for, such as maybe these planters or any number of things like the flexible dragons, but they are allowing you to use AI creation tools, which have no human involvement really whatsoever, in my opinion. And we're just going to ignore the handpicked by a seller and sourced by a seller items because those don't really have anything to do with 3D printed items in general. So what I wanted to discuss a little bit was how that's going to impact Etsy shops, specifically 3D printing Etsy shops going forward. Now, again, Etsy hasn't come out with anything like an email that they're sending to sellers or even something on their main shop page in the back end. In fact, I didn't even know about this until it was pointed out to me by a friend of mine. So what this means is those of us, and I say us because I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else, using a model that I've paid the commercial subscription fee for. In fact, those keychains that I sold on here for about a year were from KE Creations on Thangs. I paid them a monthly fee, and they gave me rights to sell that product as a physical 3D printed item on Etsy, Amazon, even at a craft show. What is now changing is, at least according to this, even if you have a commercial license to sell somebody else's models, Etsy is not going to allow that on their platform anymore. So for instance, I have a couple things here that, just to give an example, this model here as well as this one were by a creator called 3D Meeks over on Thangs. So we've got a little tree bark desk organizer or pencil holder, and then this little rope pencil cup that I found and thought was a neat design. So I subscribed to his Thangs page, and that gave me commercial rights to sell these. Not anymore, according to Etsy's new policy. This one was a free file from MakerWorld that allowed commercial use of the product under the Creative Commons Attribution license. And based off of what I'm reading here and from a lot of other people in the community, this is also no longer allowed. Now, I've kind of seen the writing on the walls for a little while when they introduced the original how it was made thing back in July of 2024. So I have been slowly moving and designing my own products. But that's one of those things that to fill the void or fill the gap, I guess. So instead of having 4, 5, 6 products on my Etsy page that I personally have designed and made myself, I fill the gap with some other things from creators like 3D Meeks or HP Invent that not only helps support them because you're paying them a monthly subscription fee, so it puts a little bit of money into their pocket, but it also helps to make me some money and kind of branch off into different spaces in the 3D printing space. So what does this mean for those of you who don't know how to design your own products? It kind of puts you in a tough situation because it really doesn't seem to matter what that product is, and if you have a commercial license to sell it, Etsy just doesn't want that on their platform. They want something that's unique, that's designed by you, which is completely understandable from one side of it. But on the other side of it, I've started to design things that I had plans of releasing as a commercial subscription package or even selling the file as a one-off. And I still plan on doing that, but it does make it harder for the people who purchase it to justify purchasing it if they're not allowed to make money on it in return. Now, of course, Etsy isn't the only platform that you can sell things on. You've got places like Amazon Handmade, as long as you're following their terms of service. You could create your own website with platforms like Squarespace or Shopify, or you could sell the stuff at a place like a craft fair or a farmer's market. So while this particular rule change is limited to Etsy for now, that doesn't mean you aren't allowed to sell the stuff that you're paying a commercial subscription for. You can still go and do that, again, on places like Amazon or your own website and a craft fair. But it definitely puts a ton of 3D printing Etsy pages in a tough situation because, again, while on one hand it's good that Etsy is trying to crack down and limit the amount of 3D printed dragons from 400 different sellers, on the other hand, it's kind of a fine line because you're doing your part in supporting a designer for making the products that they've made, while also being able to profit off of that. I know personally, unless it's something that I can't find anywhere else, I tend not to pay for a 3D printed model unless I can then turn around and profit off of it. Again, if it's something for myself, if I wanted to have something for my dog or a family member that I thought was really unique, or if I was into cosplay stuff, that might be a different situation. But as far as the subscription packages go, I wouldn't subscribe to a personal subscription package that just gives me the rights to print and download models from that specific creator. I want to be able to turn around and profit off of that. And I know that's what a lot of you are doing as well, especially those of you who are brand new to 3D printing and have just gotten into this craft and are now kind of being turned into a different direction. What I will say though is this is the perfect time to get into learning 3D modeling or coming up with ideas that you see that you need a fix for around the house, or even stuff like these pencil holders, right? Just because somebody else has designed a rope pencil holder or something that looks like tree bark or a tree stump, that doesn't mean you can't go and make your own version of it. You can't sell their version of it, right? So you can see something that's cool and turn around and learn 3D modeling and create your own version of that thing. So I would highly recommend those of you who have never used a piece of 3D modeling software, jump in and just tinker around with it. There's plenty of platforms out there like Tinkercad, there's Onshape, which I'm not too familiar with. I'm more familiar with software like Fusion or Shaper 3D, but if those pieces of software are too difficult for you to learn, I highly recommend at least starting somewhere, again, whether it's Tinkercad, or if you have a little bit more knowledge with things like sketching, Fusion and Shaper 3D are two great pieces of software. Fusion has a free for personal use license that I have linked down in the description below, and Shaper 3D also offers a free license. They are limited in their own ways, but it is a great way to get in there and start modeling and figuring things out. That way, this doesn't impact you as much as it might impact the next person. The other thing you could do is, if you absolutely do not know anything about 3D modeling, but still want to be able to sell things, start off by creating your own website. You will have to drive traffic to it, but it is another method aside from using Etsy. There's also places like Facebook Marketplace, eBay, again, Amazon Handmade, all these different places that you can now take your business elsewhere aside from Etsy. I will say Etsy has definitely been the easiest platform to get into, but it's their platform at the end of the day, and they're allowed to do what they want to do. It is slightly unfortunate for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who've purchased a couple 3D printers, are getting their shops up and running, and working to make this a side gig or, a full-time gig, take over from their day job. But it is also a great way to start thinking in the back of your head of certain things that you might want, and possibly even paying a designer for giving you exclusive rights to certain products. So if you reached out to a designer and said, hey, I have this idea in mind, this is kind of what I want it to look like, I'm using this as an example, you might be able to find somebody who's willing to create that file, give you exclusive rights to it. You are the only one who's allowed to sell it. You can have the original 3D models of it, and that may still be allowed. It is a fine line because it does say based off of a seller's original design, but that original design could have been something that you designed and then worked with somebody else to produce the 3D model of, and that you are going to be the only one selling it. So a lot of things to keep in mind. I will keep up on this as changes are being made. Again, Etsy didn't really send this out to anybody. I just ended up finding it through a buddy of mine, Zero. Many of you might be familiar with his channel. If not, I'll link his channel in the description below, Zero.command. He's got a lot of great content on 3D printing, and he has a few videos actually on designing for 3D printing with software like Blender. Blender is a little bit more in depth. It's not something that I've dived into, dived. It's not something that I've gotten into because it's just a little bit too much for me, if I'm being honest. But he's got a couple great videos on designing things in Blender for 3D printing. So I will be sure to link his channel in the description below. But again, this wasn't something that, I received an email from Etsy this morning or a couple days ago saying, hey, we're updating our terms of service or our creativity standards, and this is what the standards are going to be going forward. So I just wanted to put this out there because I know a lot of you in the 3D printing space watch this channel for the 3D print farm content. So with all that said, this is slightly going to change the 3D print farm style content that I've been doing here on the channel, simply because a lot of that content was more so for you guys than it was for me, right? It's to show you guys certain designs and models that I think might be a good seller, so you guys can go out there and try it for yourself. Of course, I'm still listing it and trying my best to make a few bucks off of it, but a lot of it was to show you what is possible, even if you don't know any 3D modeling skills, with a lot of the different designs that are out there on sources like Patreon, Thangs, MakerWorld, Printables. Now, unfortunately, for those of you who don't have any knowledge in 3D modeling, this is going to be a bit of a hit for you and your Etsy shop if all you do is sell stuff that is designed by somebody else. But I would encourage you to keep your heads up and focus on learning 3D modeling. There are a ton of great tutorials on YouTube. Cloud42 has an entire playlist on Fusion 360, which is now just called Fusion. That's besides the point. Most of the stuff in his videos are functional prints to solve a problem that he has around his workshop. What I love about his Fusion videos, though, is even though he's designing something specifically for himself, whether it be bins for Gridfinity or a 3D printed headphone holder, he's not only designing it, but he's walking you through step by step how he's designing it. And he's given you different key combinations that he's using to speed things up. So little shortcuts here and there, what buttons he's pressing, how he's going about designing the model. And in a matter of 2 or 3 days, that took me from basically being a Fusion noob to being more confident in Fusion than I am in Shaper 3D. And I've been using Shaper for 2 or 3 years. I'll caveat that with saying I'm pretty quick at picking things up like that, or technology in general. So it wasn't like it was completely foreign to me. But again, whether it's Fusion, Shaper, Onshape, Tinkercad, I highly encourage you to go online, watch some tutorials if you know nothing about it or little about it, and just start brushing up on your skills, because this new policy change is going to impact you, whether it's for the good or for the bad. Now, one other thing that I did want to discuss in this video, just to wrap things up, is how this is going to impact the designers. So I know a lot of designers have both personal and commercial subscription options. For instance, I'll pull one up here on Thangs from ForgeCore. If you click on Become a Member, he's got personal, which is 6 downloads per month, which means you're allowed to download, obviously, 6 of his designs per month, but they're only for personal use. So that's great. And he charges, if you're doing monthly billing, $11.99 a month. So he's still got that option there available. But then he goes into what his recommended is, which is $19.99 a month, which comes with a commercial license. Now, those subscriptions are probably going to be greatly impacted by this change on Etsy. I don't know for sure, but I'd be willing to bet that the majority of people who are downloading these and using them for commercial purposes are selling the stuff on Etsy. Sure, there's going to be some that are selling them on Amazon, possibly their own website or at a farmer's market or a craft fair, but my money is on the majority are using the commercial subscription for Etsy. He's also got what he calls Super Seller, which is unlimited downloads per month, which also gives you access to the commercial license, and that is $50 a month. I'm not going to comment on whether that's, expensive or not expensive. That's completely up to the designer. But what I am going to say is, if he's relying on that for, a side income or even a full income, and you go and completely wipe away, say, 75% of his commercial subscribers, that's a pretty big impact, not only on the sellers of those physical products, but on the designers themselves. So just another thing to keep in mind if you are a designer and selling your commercial packages to people selling on Etsy. With all that said, thanks for sticking with me on this one. Let me know down in the comments below how this affects you. I know for me, it's kind of like a 50-50 mixture. A lot of the stuff that I've been working on, it's not currently up there, is all designed by me for specific purposes that I have found that would be useful around the shop. So again, it's like a 50-50 mixture, because on one hand, there's, files, like I said before, that I print out, list on my shop, let you know how they do, and maybe also bring in a little bit of extra income on them, kind of more using it for YouTube content, right? But then there's also that, a little bit of a loss of income from selling the stuff like this, but it also encourages me a little bit more now to move forward with listing some of the stuff that I've designed. That way they're my own original designs and I don't have anything to worry about. So whether you think it's good or bad, let me know down in the comments what your plan is going forward with your 3D printing shop on Etsy if you have one. And if you're somebody who's been thinking about getting into 3D printing, are you familiar with design enough to make it worth your while, I guess is one of the other questions I have. Keep your heads up, everybody, and take care. I will see you in the next one.